Remember to pray for those that are in the bulletin. And also remember Chris White. He has brain cancer. He's a friend of Brother Chuck's. Esther chapter 3. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgressed thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone. For they had showed him the people of Mordecai, wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, it's a name's hard to pronounce, Ahasuerus, they cast pure, that is, the lot, before Haman, from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the province of the kingdom, and their laws are divers from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, The silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of the king Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's province to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for all commandment For a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan, the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. The title of the message this morning is Haman the Wicked. Haman the Wicked. Now, before we get into this, I want you to hold your place there and go to 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, we want to point out something that I've heard messages concerning this, and I disagree, but that's me. It's my way I see things, my opinion, and it may not be correct, but this is the way I see it. But 1 Peter chapter 2, and this is one of the verses that they rely on, in verse 13 and 14 is to submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well. Jesus said, give unto Caesar that is Caesar's, and unto God that is God's. Now, many are preaching today, and I look at many are younger than I am. Some of them are a lot younger than I am. And their cry is that we are to follow those that are evil in the government. We're follow them. Whatever they say, that's what we're to do. I disagree with that. What we are to do is, if we are supposed to give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, so we pay our taxes. And we are law-abiding citizens. But the president that we have right now, I will not follow because he's stupid. He's beyond stupid. And he doesn't make any sense. It wasn't the will of the people that elected him. It was done because there was a cheating going on. You know, the liberals can say anything they want to, but it was cheating. When I went to bed that night on the election, I was telling my wife the other day, when I went to bed on election, Trump was ahead by thousands of votes. We got up the next morning and he lost. We're not stupid. We understand the situation, what's going on. Should have never been, the president that's now should have never been president. And the things that they're doing, we can see why they're doing it. Because they don't want Trump to be the next president, because he's going to shake the bush. So I don't believe that any time an elected official, or in this case a non-elected official, we do not have to obey him because it is evil. It is wicked. And we all can see that. Mordecai would not bow down to Haman. And he was put in charge. The king gave him charge. He gave him his ring and said, here, you're in authority. Whatever you want to do, you do. Well, he was going to annihilate all the Jews. Now, down through history, we can see that those who wanted great power, to be in power, and to control the world, what was the first thing they had to do? Get rid of the Jews. They had to get rid of them. Jews are still here. God protected them because they're God's people. They are his bride. We are Christ's bride. And therefore, we will be married. Those in the New Testament Baptist Church are true and faithful to the end, I believe, will be married to Christ during, down here, the 7 years of tribulation. Up there, they're going to be judgment for the Christian and the marriage. But Israel and God's marriage will come later, because they're going to have to endure quite a bit yet. And it's kind of like at their own hand that they have to do these things. So I disagree with those who say that we have to obey wicked authority. No, we don't. Because if they're against God, then we're against them. In this case, Mordecai was against Haman because he knew what he was doing, and he was evil and wicked, and he would not obey. Now he said, well, if that's the only verse of Scripture you're going to use to prove that. No, you go into Daniel. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would not bow down. Wherever they go, they were going to be thrown into the fire furnace. God pulled them out of that. Daniel was thrown in the lion's den. Why? Because Daniel didn't listen to the law. The law was don't pray. And he did anyway. But it was a trap. So we have to be very careful when we make the statement that we have to follow wicked authority. I'm not. You can call it anything you want at that point, but we have a wicked, evil leader of America. He has no respect from any country. He's not feared by any country like our former president was. So it brings me to the point then, the first point I have, because of Haman, this wicked person, is Haman and the Antichrist. Many Bible students see in wicked Haman a picture. Now, Haman, a lot of people think these wicked men that were before us and they've died are coming back as the Antichrist. I don't believe that for a second. The Antichrist is alive and well, and he's here, and he'll show himself as soon as the rapture happens. We may know who he is, but he won't be revealed to us when we believe and that we are going to be taken out before the 7-year tribulation. But many students see wicked Haman as a picture of the future Antichrist who will persecute the Jews and seek to destroy them. Now, he's going to be their friend because they're going to be deceived for the first 3.5 years. The Catholics are going to be deceived for the first 3.5 years. And once the Antichrist shows his true self, you don't need the Catholic Church. He won't need this one world religion anymore because he will be the one world religion. So the phrase, this wicked Haman, in chapter 7, and you don't have to turn there, but it says this wicked Haman in chapter 7 and verse 6 adds up to, and there's many other names we've come across in our history that add up to 666 in the original Hebrew, and this is the number of the beast, of course. And if you want to turn to Revelation 13:18, here's what that says here. Here is wisdom. Let him that have understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 666. Now, I know, you may have run across this when you're doing your checkbook, or you may even get a paycheck and it's got 666, and you kind of like, do one of them numbers. No worries, okay? It does, I don't like that number, but there's no worries because we're not going to be involved with that. We're not going to have any dealings with that. And if we do, let's say we do have to go through the 7 years of tribulation, would be hopeful that none of us here this morning would receive that mark. Because once you receive that mark, then you're done. Your history, there's no hope for you at all, ever. Haman plotted his murders secretly while appearing to be friendly to the Jews openly. Antichrist will make a covenant with Israel for 7 years, but break it after half that time. Now, that's pretty obvious if you read the book of Revelation, what's going to happen. Haman possessed tremendous power given to him by the king. The beast will possess great power given to him by Satan. Our current president has great power. but it isn't in himself. Our president is no more than a figurehead, a mouthpiece. If we go back to Nazi Germany, everybody thinks, oh, it was Hitler. Well, if you get into reading your history, you'll find out that Hitler was used by the Nazis to get out their propaganda. They needed a mouthpiece. They needed somebody that had a great vocabulary, had a great sense of presence, and had an orientation that people would fear and shudder when they heard him speak. Hitler had no power. I mean, there was those who feared him, but the backing of Hitler was the Nazis. They were the power. Behind our president today, it's not him. It's the backing. It's the Soros and some of the other yahoos that are in office that are backing him and using him. He don't even realize it, but they're using him. And they won't listen to us, the American people. Again, I remind you, we the people. See, it's us. We the ones that makes the difference. So Haman's pride was obvious. Look at our current president. His pride is obvious. For he wanted all men to bow down to him. The beast will cause all men to worship him and his image. Turn back to Revelation. Hold your place there. Turn back to Revelation 13 and verse 8. Revelation 13 and verse 8. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose name, now I want you to understand what this verse is saying. The ones that will worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. You understand that? They're not going to be in the book. That's the ones Christ said that they are condemned already. See? Those are the ones that will never have a chance or opportunity to be saved. You know, a lot of people say, well, everybody has a chance to be saved. Well, no, they don't, because God chose, elected, and preordained those who would be before the foundation of the world. And you can't argue that. I mean, you can, but it's not going to do you any good because it's not true. Amen. Now look at verse 11 and 12. John says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he I'm having trouble this morning. Exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Now, a lot of people speculate, oh, it's Kennedy, because he got shot in the head, and he's going to come back to life. No, these people are dead. They're dead, buried. That's the end of the story. Some are in hell. Some may be able to go to heaven, but that's not the case here. Then we look at verse 15. And he had power to give. Now I want you to understand this verse. Verse 15 of chapter 13 in Revelation. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. These are the ones that I believe are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Now, if you take verse 15 and add AI to that, we can understand a lot more many things that's going to happen. We couldn't understand this verse as well as we do now because of the AIs, artificial intelligence. He's going to look like the Antichrist, he's going to speak like the Antichrist, and he's going to be able to have power like the Antichrist, except he's not the Antichrist, he's the image of the Antichrist. It all makes sense, doesn't it? People are fooling themselves if they don't think this is going to transpire or take place, but I got news for them. It will. I can't imagine hating anybody as bad as Haman hated the Jews. But Haman hated the Jews, and Antichrist will hate the Jews. The Catholics hate the Jews. It's obvious they hated the Jews. Nazi Germany hated the Jews. And they had all right to hate the Jews. Going back to, and again, history that we don't ever hear about in school, why did Germany hate the Jews so bad? Well, they had a monopoly on Germany. If you wanted to buy something, if you wanted to bank your money, you had to all go through the Jews because they owned everything. You know, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Gandhi or watched or read the book or, knew the story about Gandhi, but that's where Gandhi made a stand. He says, we're not going to give to Britain anymore. See, Britain had the same thing. They had a monopoly on India. They had a monopoly that you couldn't buy, sell anything unless you got it from the Brits because they owned everything. They owned the commerce. They owned the banks. They owned the stores. It was like the coal mines down in West Virginia and Kentucky and that. Remember Tennessee Ernie Ford singing, I owe my soul to the company store? Why? Because everything the company was double dipping. They were paying them wages, but you couldn't spend the money unless you went to their store. So they were getting their money back. That's what the song was about. I owe my soul to the company store, because they would work for the coal mines, and the coal mines had a monopoly on everything. You wanted a house? Okay, here. Company would sell you a house. You needed shoes, you needed anything from the store? Here, the company store's down the road. Just go down and buy it. Well, it's with their own money. They just gave them the money, so they turned around and got it right back. So this is the same thing that's going to take place. But Haman was doomed, even though for a time he seemed to have great power. So did the Antichrist. Satan's masterpiece, the beast, the Antichrist, will appear to be indestructible, but Christ will destroy him and his followers when he returns. We'll get to that at the end here. The second point I have is Haman the enemy. He's the enemy. Our president is the enemy of the United States. He's not a friend of the United States. He's an enemy. He's against everything that we believe and stand for. 5 years here have passed. Look at verse 7 in our text. It says, in the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast that is the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month to the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. What they did was trying to determine, okay, when is the date that we're going to have this destruction? We got to figure out when we're going to do this. I've got the authority. Now all I got to do is figure out the day. So that's what they were doing. They were figuring out the day. So 5 years pass, in verse 7, and Satan begins to work. Satan begins to work and how this was all going to take place and happen. Haman's promotion went to his head and turned him to a murderer. Being a faithful Jew, Mordecai would not bow down to Haman, and this made the proud ruler excessively angry. Now, before the election, this last election, did you see how angry this current president got with the people? He was so angry with them, he said, I'll take you outside and I'll show you who's boss. I'll show you. He was ready to have fisticuffs with the people. And he got by with it. Not that it came to punches, but he got by with it. Because nobody would challenge him. I would have said, come on, let's go. The palace knew Mordecai was a Jew, in verse 6, but they did not know, and this is what the whole story is about, Esther was one also. Esther was thrown into the mix. And we could say, well, how unfortunate. But I believe Esther was born for the very purpose to save the Jews. Amen. If you read the story. Haman decided to destroy all the Jews just because of his malice toward Mordecai. And I believe this current president is going to do the same thing just because he hates Christianity. And I'm sure he hates other things as well. But he hates Christianity. He's going to do everything he can while he's still in power to deal with it. And he's got this delusion that he's going to be elected again. He will by God's will. That's the only way. He's sure not going to be elected by the will of the people. That's pretty obvious. See, Satan is the destroyer, Apollyon. If you want to turn there, you can, Revelation 9:11. Revelation 9:11, hold your place there. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. Revelation 9:11. Haman and his fortune tellers cast lots to find what day should be set aside for the execution, and it fell nearly a year later. Now, we can see that that's all Satan driven, right? I mean, we don't believe in fortune tellers. And we don't believe in casting lots to determine whether or not what we're going to do today or do tomorrow. Haman then offered to get for the king over $25 million in silver if the king would authorize the slaying of the Jews. King's in for a rude awakening. He has no idea that his wife, the queen, is a Jew. And boy, how the God worked that out is really amazing. Haman lied. See, here's the thing. We have a liar in the White House. Haman lied about the Jews. Of course, for Satan is both a liar and a murderer. Because in 1 Peter 5:8 it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour." Unfortunately, our president is seeking who he may devour. Now, some will say, are you saying that he's the Antichrist? No, he's too stupid to be the Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to be a smart, intelligent, well-known, well-favored person. He's going to be a deceiver. I mean, he's going to deceive the world that he is Christ. And they're going to believe him. And then at the 3.5 years is over, then he's going to show himself who he really is. But it's too late. Everything's already been put into motion. Everything's already done. Foolishly, Ahasuerus gave Haman his ring and the authority to act, not realizing that he was risking the life of his very own queen. He didn't even have a clue. He didn't have an inkling that that's what was happening. Of course, Haman didn't know she was a Jew either. So he got a rude awakening as well. Haman wasted no time. For that very month, he had the decrees written and sent out. We can see that in verse 7 and 12. Ordering the Persians to destroy, kill, and plunder all the Jews in the vast reaches of the kingdom. Now, how are we going to work this out? How are we going to get out of this ordeal? Well, Mordecai had conversations with Esther. He sat in ashes and sackcloth. He prayed and cried unto God, and has to be a reason. And Esther come along and says, me and my maids we're gonna fast for 3 days while we determine what God will give to us and how to handle this situation. See, once the law was made in Persia and all those places, once the law was made, that was it. That was concrete. Even the king could not come along and change that. So we're really in a situation here. You know, the other day, when I was watching a little bit of news that I watched, I seen what our current president was saying about, oh no, he's not going to get in. There's no way he's going to get in. I've already seen to that. He's forgetting about two things. First of all, he's forgetting about we the people. And the second, he's forgetting about God. If God wants President Trump in the White House, he's going to be there. And you're not going to stay his hand. And we should probably, if the current president does get reelected, we should rejoice because that'll be the end. It'll be more closer to heaven than we've ever been. And that'll be a pure sign that this is going to take place. We may have to endure a lot. It is difficult to see how the king could make a law to wipe out millions of people in 1 minute, then sit down to eat and drink the next minute. But that's just how he was. He had no care. He had no worries. It's like our current president has no answers. I mean, little short boom, boom, or turn around, turn his back and say, well, I'm not answering that, and go on. He feels he owes no allegiance to anybody, and I'm sure Haman the same way. But dictators in our modern history have done the same thing, all out through history. And we can see what happened to them. They were destroyed. They're dead. They weren't able to accomplish what they tried because they forgot about one thing, and that's God. You can't leave God out of the equation on any of this. Turn to Revelation. I'm going to finish up with Revelation chapter 14 and 16. Because I want you to see this thing unfold. You can be a Haman. We can have Hamans in the world. And we can have the smirk on their face. And we can have the malice, they can have the malice in their heart. And they can think that they're going to get by with that. But here's the strange part of this whole thing. When you get to the end of this chapter, or end of this book, you know what we find? The very gallows that Haman built to hang Mordecai was where they hanged him. So he didn't get very far, did he? Now look at chapter 14 of Revelation and verse 14. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. You remember when the sowers came in and they sowed the good wheat in the field? And at night they came in, or the next day they came into the owner and says, somebody in the middle of the night sowed junk seed. What do we do? Do we go pick out the tares is what it was. If we go in there and pick out them weeds and the tares, he said, no, let the good grow up with the bad. Now he's coming to harvest that good wheat. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the cluster of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress even unto the horses' bridles by the space of 1,600 furlongs. The wine there is the blood of all those that were planted with the good. Now the good's already been taken out. The harvest has already been done there. So they went in and they took out the rest of it, the tares, and put it in the winepress of the wrath of God. Now people think that there's no wrath of God coming, but there is right here. This is the wrath of God's going to be poured out right here and then. Then go to chapter 16 and look at verse 15 through the end of the chapter. Christ speaking here, Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. And we're familiar with that. And the seventh angel poured out his vial or bowl into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, It is done. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. There it is again. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, even every stone about the weight of a talent. The weight of a talent is 1,000 pounds, or 100 pounds, excuse me. A talent is 100 pounds. Can you imagine a piece of ice weighing 100 pounds coming down on a person? And men blaspheme God. See, they don't even want to change their vocabulary. They hate God. They're going to continue to hate him. And while they're being killed, they're going to blaspheme him still. They blaspheme God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. Brother Cockrell asked me a question not too much before he passed away. He said, all those that are going to hell, that are in hell, he says, how do you think their demeanor is now? You would think it'd be one of repentance, right? It's not. He said they're going to curse God and cuss him and swear him more than they did before they went into the ground. Isn't that amazing? You know, if you notice in Luke 16, the rich man there, and Lazarus, he's in Abraham's bosom, and the rich man's in hell. The rich man never repented. Nope. Never. He never said, I'm sorry for what I did to Lazarus. I'm sorry that I ended up here. He was concerned about those that were his family, and he wanted good things for them. But he not one time repented. And we know he was in torment. So people that don't believe that there is a literal hell are fooling themselves. And the wrath of God is poured out upon this earth. They'll be like Haman that was hung from the very gallows that he created. So they're going to reap their rewards. They're going to have to pay the price and the penalty. God's wrath will be poured out upon this earth. And if you don't believe that, then I feel sorry for you, because that's what's going to happen. And if you do not believe in the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, you will be in hell with the rich man that's right there right now. And at the great white throne judgment, you will be cast in the lake of fire, and you'll be there forever. There's no reprieve. There's no slick defensive attorney that's going to get you off. You're not going to be able to appeal, because the judgment will be final. That's what our family members and our people that we work, that's what they need to hear. May God grant blessing upon you today.